My name is Helena Martinez, and I'm about to tell you how I transformed the most challenging day of my life into my greatest achievement. Picture finding your partner in a compromising situation, with your younger sibling 3 months before your planned ceremony. Now picture receiving a wedding invitation from them with a note saying, "Come witness what genuine connection looks like." Most people would decline the invitation or attend while distressed. I did neither. I attended in an elegant white dress with information that would alter their celebration and change our lives forever. The expression on my sibling's face when she discovered she just forfeited $8 million? Unforgettable. But I'm moving ahead of myself. Before I continue, please consider liking and subscribing, but only if you genuinely appreciate this story. I'd be interested to know where you're watching from and what time it is there. Now let me take you back to where it all began. The murmurs started the moment I walked through the heavy oak doors of St. Catherine's Cathedral. 200 heads turned in unison, like a wave of surprise rippling through the pews. I could hear the quiet exclamations, feel the astonishment radiating from every corner of that sacred space. Is that the former partner? Why is she wearing white? The boldness. I kept my chin high, my steps measured and deliberate on the burgundy carpet. My Versace dress, yes, the one I'd originally purchased for my own ceremony, fit my figure perfectly. The morning light streaming through the stained glass windows caught the subtle pearl beading, making me shimmer with each step. There they stood at the altar. Natalie, my younger sister, draped in ivory silk and lace, her blonde hair crowned with white roses. Julian beside her in his charcoal tuxedo, the same one he'd selected with me last year. His face drained of color when our eyes met. The wedding coordinator, Mrs. Patterson, scrambled toward me, her face flushed with concern. "Miss Martinez, we weren't expecting you." "My invitation says 2:05," I said calmly, holding up the pearl cardstock. "I'm right on time." I slid into a pew 3 rows from the back, crossing my legs elegantly. My mother twisted around from the front row, her mouth opening and closing in surprise. Dad's jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscle twitching from 20 feet away. But it was Natalie's reaction that strengthened my resolve. She grabbed Julian's arm, her perfectly painted lips moving rapidly. Even from here, I could read the concern in her body language. Good, let her wonder. Let her worry. The organ music swelled, attempting to restore order to the disruption I'd created simply by showing up. Father Michael cleared his throat, adjusting his glasses as he glanced between the bride and me. The tension in the cathedral was so thick you could cut it with a knife. What none of them knew, not Natalie, not Julian, not even my parents, was that I held all the cards. The small wooden box in my purse wasn't just any box. It contained 6 months of patience, decades of planning, and the kind of justice that comes wrapped in legal documents. The ceremony was about to begin, and I was exactly where I needed to be. 2 weeks earlier, I'd been sorting through mail in my downtown apartment when I saw it. That envelope with Natalie's handwriting. My hands had trembled as I opened it, already knowing what I'd find inside. The invitation was printed on pearl cardstock, the exact same design I'd chosen for our ceremony, the same font, the same wording. She'd even used the same calligrapher. But it was the handwritten note tucked inside that troubled me deeply. "Dearest Helena, I know this might be difficult, but family should celebrate family. Come see what genuine connection looks like. We'd prefer you not miss it. With regards, Nat and Julian." I'd stood there in my kitchen reading those words over and over. The calculated nature of it, the intentional malice. She wasn't just taking my partner. She was emphasizing it, using my own ceremony plans as the weapon. That night, I'd called my best friend Rachel. "Don't go," she'd urged. "It's what she wants to humiliate you." But Rachel didn't know what I knew. She didn't know about the meeting I'd had with James Mitchell, my grandmother's attorney, just 1 week before. She didn't know about the documents sitting in his office safe, waiting for the perfect moment. "I'm going," I told her, "and I'm going to give them a ceremony they'll never forget." I'd spent the next 2 weeks in perfect preparation, not for revenge. No, that was too simple, too emotional. This was about justice, about truth, about finally, after 30 years of being the accommodating daughter, the reserved one, the one who never made waves, standing up and claiming what was rightfully mine. I'd even called Julian once. He'd answered on the 3rd ring, his voice guilty and defensive. "Helena, I can explain." "Save it for someone who cares," I'd said. "I just wanted to make sure you're content with your choice." "I what? 8 million? Content, Julian?" Hope she's worth it. I'd hung up before he could respond. Let him wonder what I meant. Let him lose sleep trying to figure it out. Men like Julian always thought they were the most perceptive person in the room. He was about to learn differently. The invitation still sat on my coffee table the morning of the ceremony, that pointed note visible beneath it. But I wasn't the same woman who'd received it. I was someone stronger, someone who'd finally learned that being considerate and being passive weren't the same thing. Growing up as the older sister should have meant something. In most families, it did. But in the Martinez household, I was the practice run and Natalie was the masterpiece. It started when we were kids. While Natalie got a car for her 16th birthday, a white BMW with a red bow, I got a lecture about responsibility and a bus pass. You need to learn the value of hard work, Dad had said, while Natalie posted social media photos from the driver's seat. At every family gathering, the comparisons were constant. Natalie's so outgoing. Natalie lights up the room. Why can't you be more like your sister, Helena? I was the straight A student who got into MIT for architecture. Natalie barely graduated from state school with a communications degree. Guess whose graduation party was bigger? You're too serious, Mom would say, frowning at my sketches and blueprints. People don't connect with women who are too focused. Meanwhile, Natalie floated through life on charm and appearance, taking whatever she wanted. My prom date, my spot on the varsity tennis team. She didn't even play tennis until she saw me win districts. My internship at Preston Architecture until she convinced them she'd be better at client relations. But there was one person who saw through it all. Grandma Eleanor. You have something Natalie will never have, she told me once, her weathered hands covering mine. Substance, patience, the ability to build something real. I'd thought she meant my architecture career. Now sitting in this cathedral, I understood she'd meant so much more. The pattern with Natalie was always the same. She'd see something that made me content, decide she deserved it more, and take it. Our parents enabled it every time. Natalie's just spirited, they'd say. You're the mature one, Helena. Be the bigger person. I'd been the bigger person for 34 years. I'd smiled through the pain, swallowed my frustration, accepted the unfairness. Even when she'd started interacting inappropriately with Julian at my own engagement party, I told myself I was imagining things. You're overthinking, Julian had said when I'd brought it up. She's your sister. She's just being friendly. 3 months later, I'd found them in our apartment, in the apartment I paid for, on the furniture we'd received as an engagement gift. And still, our parents had found a way to make it my fault. You work too much. You should have paid more attention to him. But today, the practice run was about to become the final edition. Natalie's patterns had a signature, like a mark on a record. She always wanted what was mine. But Julian, he was her masterpiece of calculated behavior. It started in high school with Jake Morrison. We dated for 6 months, my first real relationship. The night of homecoming, I found them in an inappropriate situation in his car. He initiated it, she'd claimed to our parents. I tried to stop him. Jake was banned from our house, and I was told to stop being so dramatic. Then came the Preston Scholarship. I'd worked 3 years for it, volunteering, maintaining a 4.0, building houses with Habitat for Humanity. The day before final interviews, my portfolio mysteriously disappeared. Natalie found it later, water-damaged and ruined. She went to the interview instead, claiming she'd always been interested in humanitarian work. She got the scholarship. She never used it for anything humanitarian, but those were just preliminaries compared to Julian. We'd met at an architecture conference. He was charming, ambitious, everything I thought I wanted. For 2 years, we built a life together. We had plans, a firm of our own, a house in the suburbs, maybe children someday. Natalie had been living in Miami then, working as an influencer. She came home for Thanksgiving last year, saw my ring, saw my contentment, and something shifted in her eyes. I should have known then. By Christmas, she was texting him constantly. Work stuff, she'd say. She didn't work in architecture. By Valentine's Day, she was showing up at our dinner dates. What a coincidence. By April, I was finding her belongings in our bedroom. Julian said I was paranoid, that it must have fallen when she'd helped us move furniture. 3 weeks later, I came home early from a business trip. The sound that escaped me when I saw them wasn't quite human. But what hurt more than the situation was Julian's first words. She's everything you're not. Spontaneous, fun, exciting, all the things that meant not predictable like Helena. They moved in together the next week. Our parents threw them a housewarming party. I wasn't invited, but Mom made sure to tell me how content they looked. But here's what Natalie never understood about taking everything from me. She never bothered to look closely at what she was acquiring. She saw the surface. The attractive partner, the ring, the ceremony plans. She didn't see the debt, the deception, the credit accounts Julian had opened in my name. She definitely didn't see what Grandma had seen or what was waiting in that wooden box. The numbers haunted me at night. $50,000. That's what I'd already spent on our ceremony. Deposits I couldn't recover. The dress, the venue, the catering for 200 guests who would now be watching my sister marry my former partner. But the financial impact was just the beginning. The morning after I'd discovered them, I'd walked into Brennan and Associates, where I'd worked for 7 years, to find everyone staring. Someone had seen Julian leaving our apartment building with luggage. Someone else had seen Natalie's social media story from my bedroom. By lunch, I was the office topic of discussion. Maybe you should take some time off, my boss, Richard, had suggested, just until things settle down. That time off cost me the Waterfront Plaza project, a $40 million development I'd been leading for 2 years. They gave it to Bradley, who'd been there 6 months. We need someone without complications, Richard had explained. The promotion I'd been promised was gone. The bonus I'd been counting on to pay off my student loans evaporated. My professional reputation was compromised. Meanwhile, our family's architecture firm, Martinez and Associates, the company Grandma Eleanor had built from nothing, was struggling financially. Poor investments my father had made. Contracts that fell through. We were 3 months from bankruptcy, though my parents kept pretending everything was fine. We need Natalie's ceremony to be perfect, Mom had said just last week. The Thompsons are coming and they might invest. The Thompsons, Julian's wealthy parents, who had no idea their son was drowning in financial obligations. Dad had actually called me about it. You should come to the ceremony, Helena, for the family business. She took my partner. You need to stop being so self-focused. This is bigger than your feelings. I'd hung up on him. Then I'd called my accountant and learned exactly how serious things were. If the company went under, I'd lose everything. My inheritance, my portfolio, my entire future. That's when I'd really started paying attention to the documents James Mitchell had been trying to show me. That's when I'd learned what Grandma Eleanor had really left behind. Your grandmother was a very strategic woman, James had said, sliding the papers across his desk. She knew exactly what she was doing. The company was worth $8 million if you knew where to look, and Grandma had made sure I would be the one looking. Dad actually said I should have tried harder to maintain Julian's interest, as if his satisfaction was my responsibility, as if I was the one who'd failed. The social media situation started within hours. Natalie had posted their engagement photo on every platform, that perfect sunset shot on the beach. Her hand strategically placed to show off my grandmother's ring, the one Julian had proposed to me with. The caption read, "When you know, you know. Sometimes connection finds you in unexpected places. Can't wait to marry my best friend. Positive sentiment. 500 reactions in the first hour. Comments from our mutual contacts, my contacts, congratulating her. You two are perfect together. Connection wins. So happy for you both. Not one person asked about me. At work, I became invisible in a different way. Conversation stopped when I walked by. Social invitations dried up. The annual gala I'd organized for 5 years, they asked Jennifer to take over. We just think you need less on your plate right now, Richard had said. My college roommate Ashley disconnected from me after Natalie told everyone I'd been controlling toward Julian. My book club disbanded rather than choose sides. Even my yoga instructor suggested I might be bringing difficult energy to class. The worst part was the pity. The few people who still talked to me looked at me like I was damaged. How are you holding up? They'd ask, voices dripping with artificial concern, eager for information to share at happy hour. Rachel stayed loyal, but even she didn't understand. Just move forward, she'd said. Living well is the best outcome. But I wasn't interested in outcomes. I was interested in justice. There's a difference. Natalie's social media became a daily challenge. I couldn't stop observing pictures from my vendors, my florist, my caterer, my venue. She was literally living my ceremony, just with a different partner. No, the same partner I'd chosen. The one who was supposed to be mine. Tasting cakes today with a photo at Manette's Bakery, where I'd already put down a deposit. Found the dress at the same boutique where I'd bought mine. Planning the honeymoon of our dreams to Italy. The exact itinerary I'd researched for months. Each post was a deliberate reminder. She knew I'd see them. She was counting on it. But while she was posting pictures, I was having different conversations with attorneys, with accountants, with people who'd worked with Grandma Eleanor for decades. Your sister has no idea, does she? James Mitchell had asked during our third meeting. No, I'd replied, finally allowing myself a small smile. She's too busy planning her perfect ceremony. If you've ever been let down by someone you trusted, you know this pain. But here's where the story takes an unexpected turn. Before I reveal what was in that box, I want to ask you something. What would you have done in my situation? Would you have gone to the ceremony? Drop a comment below. I read every single one. And if this story resonates with you, please consider that engagement button. It really helps other people find these stories. Now let me tell you about the conversation that changed everything. 3 days before the ceremony, Natalie called. I recognized her ringtone, Material Girl, because of course it was, and almost didn't answer. But something made me pick up. You're not actually coming, right? Her voice was sugar-sweet poison. Wouldn't miss it for the world. Silence. Then, Helena, don't embarrass yourself. I'm not the one who should be embarrassed. Look, I know you're hurt. Hurt? I laughed, and even I was surprised by how calm I sounded. I'm not hurt, Nat. I'm grateful. Grateful, you did me a favor. Julian is all yours. Another pause. I could practically hear her trying to figure out my angle. Just don't wear white or anything dramatic. Wouldn't dream of it, I responded smoothly. She hung up first. 5 minutes later, Julian texted. Can we talk? Then, I'm sorry about how things happened. Then, you deserve to know the truth. Then, it's about the finances. That last one made me pause. He didn't know about Grandma's will. That was still sealed. So what finances was he talking about? I didn't respond, but I saved everything. The next morning, Mom showed up at my apartment unannounced. She stood in my doorway in her Chanel suit, looking like she'd rather be anywhere else. You need to stay home Saturday. It's a free country, Mom. Helena, please. Just this once, think of the family. Like Natalie thought of family when she became involved with my partner. Mom's face tightened. That's different. They fell in love in my apartment. You're being crude. I'm being honest. There's a difference. She pulled out her checkbook. Actually pulled out a checkbook in 2024. How much will it take? Excuse me? For you to stay away? 5,000? 10? I stared at her, my own mother, trying to purchase my absence from my sister's ceremony to my former partner. Keep your money, I said quietly. You're going to need it. What's that supposed to mean? Ask Dad about the Patterson contract. Ask him about the loans he took out against the company. Her face went pale. How do you... Goodbye, Mom. After she left, I called James Mitchell. Is everything ready? The documents are authenticated and sealed. The board members have been notified to be on standby. And the timing? Whenever you're ready, Miss Martinez. Your grandmother made sure of that. I hung up and looked at the white Versace dress hanging on my closet door. Almost time. The family intervention came Friday night, less than 18 hours before the ceremony. They appeared at my apartment, Mom, Dad, and Aunt Patricia, the family enforcer. This has gone far enough, Dad started, settling into my couch like he owned it. You will not disrupt your sister's ceremony. I'm not disrupting anything. I'm attending as invited, Aunt Patricia expressed concern. The entire extended family will be there. The Washingtons, the Clearys, the Brennans. What will people think? The truth. Don't be difficult, Dad said firmly. The company needs this ceremony to go perfectly. Julian's family has connections. Julian is $200,000 in debt, I said calmly. Did he mention that? The room went quiet. Mom recovered first. You're lying. Financial obligations, credit accounts, a failed business venture in Miami. I pulled up the files on my phone. I had a private investigator look into it after I found them together. Wanted to know what kind of man I'd almost married. Dad's face was turning red. You had no right. I had every right. He opened 3 credit accounts in my name. I'm still fighting the fraud charges. This is exactly why he left you, Mom said coldly. You're so controlling. He didn't leave me. He was unfaithful with my sister, who's welcome to him. Stop being vindictive, Aunt Patricia said. Family supports family. Where was that support when I needed it? You're the older one, the responsible one. Act like it. My phone buzzed. James Mitchell. Final review complete. Board members confirmed for emergency meeting Monday at 9 a.m. I looked at my family. These people who'd never once taken my side, who'd spent my entire life making me smaller so Natalie could shine brighter. I'll see you all tomorrow, I said, standing up. 2:00 sharp. Dad stood too, trying to loom over me. If you show up tomorrow, what? You'll disown me? Distance me? You already did that when you gave Natalie my ceremony vendors, my venue, my life. We're trying to save the family business. No, I said, opening my door. You're trying to save yourselves. There's a difference. As they filed out, Mom turned back. Your grandmother would be disappointed in you. I smiled then, my first real smile in months. We'll see about that. After they left, I opened the wooden box one more time, running my fingers over the legal documents inside. Grandma Eleanor's real will, the one she'd hidden from everyone except James Mitchell. Tomorrow, everything would change. Grandma Eleanor had passed 6 months ago on a rainy Tuesday in January. I'd been the only one with her at the end, holding her delicate hand while she struggled for breath. Patience, my dear, she'd whispered, her eyes still sharp despite the medication. The quiet ones change the world. At her funeral, Natalie had expressed emotion dramatically despite not visiting once during Grandma's 3-month battle with illness. She'd even tried to give a eulogy but became overwhelmed after 2 sentences. Everyone comforted her. Poor Nat, she's so sensitive. I'd given no eulogy. I'd sat in the back, composed, remembering the real Eleanor Martinez, the woman who'd built an architecture firm from nothing in 1978, when women weren't supposed to run businesses. 2 weeks after the funeral, James Mitchell had called. Your grandmother left specific instructions. The will reading is postponed for 6 months. Why? She said you'd understand when the time was right. I hadn't understood then. But as spring turned to summer and my life changed piece by piece, I started getting calls from James, from Grandma's old business partners, from people I'd never heard of who knew things about our family's company that even Dad didn't know. Your grandmother was concerned, James had said during our first real meeting, about your father's management, about your sister's influence, but mostly about you, about me. She said you were the only one who understood what she'd built, the only one who cared about legacy instead of lifestyle. He'd shown me documents, incorporation papers, patent filings, property deeds. Martinez and Associates was worth far more than anyone knew. Grandma had been quietly buying back shares for decades, placing them in a trust. But there are conditions, James had explained, very specific conditions. The main one, the heir had to be unmarried or married to someone approved by the board of directors. Grandma's hand-picked board, not Dad's associates, someone financially stable, someone of good character. She knew, I'd said, understanding finally dawning. She knew about Julian. She suspected she also knew about your sister's patterns. So, if Natalie marries Julian, she forfeits any claim to the inheritance, and if she's already married to him when the will is read, she can't contest it. James had smiled. Your grandmother was a very strategic woman. Now, the night before the ceremony, I held the sealed will in my hands. 6 months exactly since Grandma's passing. The timing was perfect. Thank you, I whispered to her memory, for seeing me, for believing in me. Tomorrow, patience would become power. The full scope of Grandma's plan was impressive. Martinez and Associates wasn't just a small family firm. It was the tip of an $8 million structure. Over 40 years, Grandma had quietly acquired patents, properties, and partnerships, keeping them in separate entities that only she controlled. The office building on 5th Street, owned by a trust, the revolutionary design software the firm used. She held the patent, the contracts with 3 Fortune 500 companies, personal relationships she'd maintained outside the official business. Your father never bothered to look, James had explained, spreading the documents across his conference table. He assumed he knew everything about the company because his name was on the door. But the conditions for inheritance were strict. The heir must be of Martinez blood, unmarried or married to someone of demonstrable financial stability, approved by the board of directors within 30 days of the will's reading, of sound moral character as determined by specific criteria. That last one was Grandma's master stroke. She'd defined moral character in legal terms. No criminal record, no outstanding debts over $50,000, no history of inappropriate relationships with engaged or married persons. She really thought of everything. I'd marveled. She had 6 months after your engagement to refine the language. James had said she was concerned about Julian from the start, but she never said anything. She believed in letting people reveal themselves. The board of directors was equally strategic. 5 people Grandma had worked with for decades, all with unshakable integrity. They'd been waiting, silent partners in her plan. What happens if no one meets the conditions? I'd asked. The entire estate goes to the International Women's Architecture Foundation. And if Natalie contests? She can try, but marrying a man with over $200,000 in financial obligations who committed credit fraud against her own sister. James had shaken his head. No judge would override your grandmother's wishes for that. The ceremony invitation on my coffee table seemed to mock me. Come see what genuine connection looks like. Genuine connection. Natalie thought she'd won because she'd taken Julian. She had no idea she'd actually lost everything the moment she said, "I do." The wooden box sat beside the invitation, containing not just the will, but also Julian's credit reports, the fraud documentation, and 3 years of Grandma's personal letters expressing her concerns about Natalie's character. Tomorrow, at exactly the right moment, the truth would set everyone free, whether they wanted to be free or not. The ceremony reception was in full swing when I arrived, cocktail hour before the ceremony. Natalie's idea of sophistication? I could hear the conversation floating from the garden where guests mingled with champagne and judgment. The seating chart by the entrance told me everything I needed to know about my place in this event. Table 19, the last table in the corner by the kitchen doors. I was seated with the catering staff's families and plus ones who'd been added last minute. Helena. Brittany, one of Natalie's bridesmaids, appeared with a group of others. They all wore matching blush pink dresses and identical expressions. We didn't think you'd actually come. Wouldn't miss it, I said smoothly, signing the guest book with a steady hand. They whispered behind manicured hands, already texting furiously. Within minutes, the whispers spread through the garden like wildfire. I made my way outside where 200 guests pretended not to stare. The garden was decorated exactly as I'd planned for my ceremony. White roses, string lights, even the same string quartet playing Pachelbel's canon. Then I saw him, Richard Brennan, CEO of Brennan Industries, our biggest potential client. He was chatting with Julian's parents, who were putting on their best show of affluence despite their son's obligations. Helena, Richard nodded. Clearly uncomfortable. I didn't expect to see you here. Family is family, I replied, accepting a champagne flute from a passing server. Across the garden, I spotted another surprise. 3 members of Grandma's board. They weren't supposed to be here, but each caught my eye and nodded slightly. James Mitchell had been busy. The ceremony coordinator announced it was time to take seats for the ceremony. As I walked past the head table, I heard Natalie's voice from the bridal suite window above. Is she really here in white? Goodness, she's so attention-seeking. Julian's response was muffled, but I caught the words inheritance and mistake. I settled into my chair at table 19, surrounded by strangers who had no idea who I was. Perfect. I wanted to be invisible until the moment I wasn't. The string quartet shifted to the processional music. Guests turned toward the aisle, phones raised to capture the perfect moment. The bridesmaids began their walk, each one shooting me a look of pity or disapproval as they passed. Then came Julian, taking his place at the altar with barely a glance in my direction. His best man whispered something that made him laugh nervously. The music swelled, everyone stood, and there was Natalie, radiant in white, walking toward her destiny. She had no idea how right she was about genuine connection being revealed today. The ceremony proceeded like a carefully orchestrated situation. Father Michael spoke about love, commitment, and honesty, while Julian shifted nervously and Natalie appeared confident. Then came the personal vows. Of course, Natalie had insisted on personal vows. She went first, her voice carrying across the garden with practiced emotion. Julian, you came into my life when I least expected it. You showed me what true connection really looks like. Some people, she paused, glancing directly at me, go through life thinking they know what connection is. But real connection, true connection, can't be forced. It can't be scheduled or planned. It just happens. And when it does, nothing and no one can stand in its way. The crowd murmured appreciatively. Several people turned to look at me, waiting for a reaction. I kept my face perfectly neutral, my hands folded calmly in my lap. Julian's vows were shorter, vaguer. Natalie, you bring excitement to my life. You're spontaneous, fun, everything I never knew I needed. He swallowed hard. You make me feel energized in ways I never expected. I noticed he never used the word love. Not once. Father Michael smiled kindly. These two souls have found each other against all odds, overcoming obstacles to be here today. Obstacles. Is that what I was now? An obstacle they'd overcome? Marriage is a sacred bond, Father Michael continued. It requires honesty, trust, and mutual respect. It requires both partners to come together freely, without reservation or hidden agendas. I saw Julian's jaw clench at hidden agendas. He knew about his obligations. He knew what he was really after. But did Natalie? Before we continue, Father Michael said, I must remind everyone that marriage is not just a union of hearts, but also a legal contract binding in the eyes of both God and law. Several of Grandma's board members leaned forward slightly. They knew what was coming. If anyone here knows of any legal impediment to this marriage, any reason why these two should not be joined in holy matrimony, speak now or forever hold your peace. The garden went silent. 200 people held their breath. Natalie turned slightly, looking directly at me with an expression that said, I dare you. I stood up. Quiet exclamations rippled through the crowd like dominoes falling. Natalie's face went from confident to shocked. Julian went pale. I object, I said, my voice clear and steady. On legal grounds? Father Michael blinked in surprise. Legal grounds? I walked forward, pulling the wooden box from my purse. I have documents that materially affect this union. The silence was significant. This is the moment everything changed. If someone had treated you this way, would you have stayed silent? Or would you have done what I did next? I'm curious, what's the biggest challenge you've overcome? Share in the comments if you're comfortable. Your story might help someone else going through the same thing. And remember, if you're appreciating this, that subscribe button is right there. Now, let me tell you about the most satisfying moment of my life. I object on legal grounds. My voice carried across the garden with a clarity that surprised even me. 200 faces turned in unison, a sea of shock and disbelief. Someone's champagne glass hit the ground with a sharp crack. Father Michael looked like he'd never actually had anyone object before. Miss Martinez, this is highly irregular. I have documentation that materially affects this union, I said, walking down the aisle with measured steps. My white Versace dress caught the afternoon light, and I heard someone whisper, She wore white to her sister's ceremony. Yes, I did. Helena, sit down. My mother's voice was sharp from the front row. I ignored her, reaching the altar where Natalie stood frozen, her bouquet trembling in her hands. Julian looked like he might leave at any second. These are legal documents, I said, handing the wooden box to Father Michael. Authenticated and notarized concerning the estate of Eleanor Martinez and the conditions affecting any marriage within the Martinez family. Father Michael hesitated. I don't think... Read them! James Mitchell stood up from his seat in the fifth row. I'm James Mitchell, attorney for the Martinez estate. Those documents are legally binding and time-sensitive. Natalie found her voice. This is ridiculous. You can't just... Actually, I can. I turned to face the crowd, my voice carrying clearly. 6 months ago, our grandmother Eleanor Martinez passed away. What most of you don't know is that she left behind a very specific will with very specific conditions. You're lying, Natalie responded sharply. The will was read. I was there. That was the preliminary will, James Mitchell said, walking forward. The full estate documentation was sealed for 6 months as per Mrs. Martinez's explicit instructions. Today marks exactly 6 months since her passing. Father Michael opened the box with shaking hands, pulling out the thick legal documents. His eyes widened as he read this. This says the entire Martinez estate, valued at $8 million, is left to Helena Martinez, conditional upon her marital status. Quiet exclamations rippled through the crowd. I saw Richard Brennan lean forward, suddenly very interested. It states that the heir must be either unmarried or married to someone of demonstrable financial stability, approved by the board of directors. Father Michael continued, his voice growing stronger. It also states that any Martinez family member who marries someone with outstanding debts exceeding $50,000 or a history of financial fraud forfeits all claims to the estate. Julian wavered on his feet. Natalie grabbed his arm, her nails digging into his sleeve. Furthermore, Father Michael read, any family member who engages in inappropriate relationships with an engaged person is permanently excluded from inheritance. The silence was absolute. You could have heard a pin drop in that garden. How much debt do you have, Julian? I asked conversationally. Last count was over $200,000, wasn't it? Plus the credit accounts you opened in my name. The crowd responded with surprise. Father Michael's voice echoed across the stunned garden as he continued reading from the will, each word falling like a hammer blow. The entire Martinez estate, including Martinez and Associates architecture firm, all associated patents, properties, and partnerships, valued at $8 million, is hereby bequeathed to Helena Marie Martinez. Natalie's face had gone from red to white to an concerning shade of gray. That's impossible. The company is Dad's claim. The company is built on Grandma's patents, I said calmly. Her properties, her partnerships. Dad's been managing it, but he never owned it. Grandma made sure of that. James Mitchell pulled out additional documents. Mrs. Eleanor Martinez retained 78% ownership through various trusts and holding companies. She was very specific about the conditions for inheritance. This is fraud. Julian finally found his voice. You can't just... Mr. Thompson, James addressed him directly. Are you aware that opening credit accounts in another person's name is a federal offense? Miss Martinez has chosen not to press charges yet. The crowd was buzzing now, phones coming out, people recording. This would be all over social media within hours. Father Michael cleared his throat. There's more. It states here that any marriage performed under false pretenses, specifically regarding financial status or with the intent to defraud, can be challenged in court. We're not married yet, Natalie responded loudly. This doesn't apply. Actually, one of the board members, Mrs. Chen, stood up. The moment you announced your engagement publicly, you triggered the morality clause. Marrying your sister's partner while he was still engaged to her constitutes a demonstrable lack of moral character, as defined in Section 7, subsection 3. You knew? Natalie turned on me, her carefully styled hair coming undone. You knew about this the whole time? I found out 2 weeks ago, I said, right after you sent me that invitation telling me to come see what genuine connection looks like. But if you're married to Julian? Natalie started desperately. I'm not married to Julian. You are, or were about to be. I turned to the crowd. Julian Thompson has over $200,000 in financial obligations, 3 maxed-out credit accounts in my name, and a failed business that he never disclosed. The board would never approve him, which means if I had married him, I would have lost everything too. The implications hit Natalie like a physical blow. She staggered backward, her designer heels catching on her train. You did me a favor, Nat, I continued. You saved me from making the biggest mistake of my life. And in return, you get Julian, obligations and all, while I get the company, the properties, and the future Grandma always intended for me. The prenuptial agreement. Julian suddenly shouted. Natalie, the agreement you signed. Everyone turned to stare at him. What agreement? Natalie's voice was barely a whisper. The one where you agreed to keep finances separate, Julian said desperately. Where you waived claims to each other's assets. You mean the one protecting your assets? Natalie laughed with distress. What assets, Julian? Your debt? The garden erupted into chaos. The unraveling happened in real time, like watching a building collapse in slow motion. Julian grabbed Natalie's hands, his voice desperate. Natalie, we can work this out. She yanked away from him. Work what out? You're in financial trouble. You deceived me. I never deceived you. You said you were successful. You said you had investments. I do have investments. In what, games? She was expressing herself emotionally now, mascara running down her cheeks. You knew about the inheritance? You knew and you chose me anyway. This isn't over, Natalie said intensely at me, her fairy tale princess image completely shattered. I'll contest this. I'll pursue legal action. With what resources? I asked quietly. You just left your job to plan this ceremony. Julian is in debt. Mom and Dad are about to be investigated for fraud, and you signed an agreement waiving financial claims. The truth of her situation hit her forcefully. She'd given up everything for a man who was worse than in debt. He was a liability. Grandma always said you were special, Natalie said with bitterness. Her precious Helena. No, I corrected. She said I was patient. There's a difference. James Mitchell stepped forward. The board meeting is Monday at 9 a.m., Miss Martinez. We'll need you there to formally accept your position. I nodded, then looked at the stunned crowd. Thank you all for coming. I believe the reception is still paid for, my deposit actually. Please enjoy the event. Then I turned and walked back down the aisle, leaving disruption in my wake. The legal machinery started turning before I even reached my car. James Mitchell was a professional conducting a symphony of consequences. "Mr. Thompson!" he called out, stopping Julian from fleeing. "You'll need to stay. The authorities have some questions about those fraudulent credit accounts." 2 officers had appeared. Apparently, James had anticipated this moment. They weren't arresting Julian, not yet. But the questioning would be enough to damage what was left of his reputation. "This is unfair," Julian protested. "She set me up." "You created the situation yourself the moment you committed fraud," Officer Williams said calmly. "We just need to verify some signatures." Meanwhile, the board members had approached my father. Mrs. Chen was holding a tablet, scrolling through financial records. "Mr. Martinez, can you explain this withdrawal from the company account and this one and these 17 others? Those were business expenses for your personal mortgage." Mr. Yamamoto, another board member, raised an eyebrow. "That's embezzlement." "I'm the president," my father protested. "Were," Mrs. Chen corrected. "You were the president of a company you never owned." The ceremony guests had split into 2 camps, those fleeing the drama and those recording every second. I saw at least 3 people live streaming. Social media discussion. Grandma was probably already trending. Natalie tried one last desperate approach. "Wait, if Julian and I don't get married, then Helena can marry him and lose everything." I laughed. Actually laughed. "Natalie, I wouldn't marry Julian now if he was the last man on earth. Besides, the fraud charges make him ineligible under Grandma's morality clause. He's detrimental to any Martinez inheritance." "You planned this?" she accused. "You knew I'd take him." "I suspected you'd try. You always want what's mine." "But Julian was a surprise. I didn't know about his obligations until after I discovered you together." Interesting how things work out. Richard Brennan approached me as I reached my car. "Miss Martinez, Brennan Industries would like to discuss a partnership with Martinez and Associates. Under your leadership, of course." "I'll have my office call you Monday," I said professionally, though inside I was pleased. This was the contract Dad had been pursuing for 2 years. "Your grandmother would be proud," he said quietly. "She always said you were the future of the company." As I drove away, I saw the scene in my rearview mirror. Natalie distressed on the altar. Julian being questioned by authorities, my parents speaking intensely with James Mitchell, and 200 guests capturing every moment for posterity. The reception hall was still set up, the cake still waiting to be cut, the band probably wondering if they should play. My perfect ceremony turned into Natalie's difficult situation. Justice had been served, and it was satisfying. By Sunday morning, the video had gained attention online. Bride's sister objects with 8 million will had 3 million views and counting. Someone had caught the entire thing from my entrance in white to Natalie's complete response. The comments were intense, but mostly on my side. The sister got exactly what she deserved. Grandma planning strategically from beyond. Imagine forfeiting $8 million for an indebted partner. My phone hadn't stopped buzzing. Rachel called first. "This is everywhere. Also, remind me never to cross you." But the real fallout was just beginning. Natalie's social media, where she documented every moment of ceremony planning, became a space of deleted posts and critical comments. Her influencer career was over before it started. Julian had disappeared completely. His social media went dark. His apartment was already listed for rent, and rumor had it he'd relocated to his parents' house in Connecticut. The fraud investigation was ongoing, but my attorney assured me he'd at least have to pay back the money he'd taken. The professional aftermath was even more dramatic. By Monday morning, 3 major clients had reached out to Martinez and Associates, specifically requesting to work with me, the story of a woman who'd quietly built her success while her family underestimated her. That was the kind of leadership they wanted. "Your grandmother was remarkable," one CEO told me. "She built this company when women weren't supposed to run businesses. Looks like it's in good hands." The board meeting was a formality. Unanimous approval, just as James had predicted. I was officially CEO of Martinez & Associates with full control of an $8 million enterprise I'd helped build, but never thought I'd run. Dad tried to show up at the office Monday afternoon. Security turned him away. I'd had his access revoked. The investigation into his embezzlement was moving forward. He'd probably avoid criminal penalties, but his reputation was damaged. Mom called 17 times before I finally answered. How could you do this to your family? I didn't do anything, Mom. I just stopped letting you do things to me. Your sister is devastated. She'll survive. Maybe she'll even learn something. She had to move back home. Then maybe you can finally teach her about consequences. The call ended with Mom becoming emotional about how I'd disrupted everything. But for the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty. I hadn't disrupted anything. I'd revealed the truth. Tuesday's headline in the business section: Martinez and Associates under new leadership. Performance improves. Wednesday's update: Julian Thompson facing fraud charges. Thursday's development: Natalie started a job at Starbucks. Friday's achievement: Brennan Industries signed a $40 million contract with Martinez and Associates. Grandma had been right. The quiet ones do change the world. We just do it with paperwork instead of noise. 2 weeks after the ceremony situation, my family attempted reconciliation. They showed up at my new office, the corner suite that used to be Dad's, looking like refugees from their former life. Dad had aged noticeably in 2 weeks. The investigation had frozen his personal assets. Mom's designer clothes looked wrinkled, her perfect hair unstyled. And Natalie? She looked hollow, like someone had removed her confidence and left only the shell. "We need to talk," Dad started. But his usual commanding tone was gone. About what? The embezzlement charges, the attorneys handling that. About the family, Mom said weakly. We're still family. Are we? Because family doesn't usually try to harm each other. You harmed us. Natalie finally spoke, her voice raw. You took everything. I took what was mine. What Grandma left me. What you tried to take. I didn't know about the will. But you knew Julian was my partner. You knew the ceremony vendors were mine. You knew the pain you were causing, and you enjoyed it. Silence. For the first time in our lives, Natalie had no comeback. Grandma left me a letter, I said, pulling it from my desk drawer. Want to hear what she wrote? They stared as I read. My dearest Helena, if you're reading this, then my plan worked. I've watched your family diminish you for years. Watched them take your kindness for weakness. Your father is misguided and values appearance over substance. Julian's silence was telling. The truth was written all over his face. He'd thought Natalie would inherit, not me. He'd bet on the wrong sister. You used me, Natalie whispered, the realization hitting her. You couldn't get Helena's assets, so you thought you'd get mine. My parents had rushed to the altar, Mom trying to salvage something, anything. This is a family matter. Everyone, please. Mrs. Martinez? Richard Brennan's voice cut through the chaos. Is it true your husband has been managing a company he doesn't actually own? Dad's face went red. This is absurd. Actually, James Mitchell interrupted, I have documentation here showing that Mr. Martinez has taken out several loans against company assets he doesn't own. That's fraud. The board will be pursuing legal action. The board? Dad responded with surprise. What board? I'm the president of a company you don't own, Mrs. Chen said calmly. Your position is terminated effective immediately. Miss Helena Martinez is the new CEO pending board approval, which I can assure you she'll receive unanimously. The consequences kept mounting. Julian's parents were backing away from the altar, his mother's face showing concern as she realized her son's obligations were now her problem again. The Thompsons, who'd been so proud moments before, looked like they wanted to disappear. The ceremony is concluded, Father Michael announced unnecessarily. The altar looked like a disrupted scene. Natalie's bouquet trampled, Julian's material scattered, the unity candle knocked over. Your mother enables poor behavior in people. And Natalie is what happens when appearance comes without character. But you, my dear, you have both strength and kindness. The company was always meant to be yours. I just had to make sure you got it without them harming you first. Be patient. Wait for them to reveal themselves, then rise. Mom was becoming emotional. Dad looked stunned. Natalie stared at the floor. She saw us, Dad whispered. All of us. She cared for you anyway, I said. But she didn't trust you. There's a difference. What do we do now? Mom asked. You figure it out without my resources, without my help, without using me as your support system. For once in your lives, handle your own consequences. You're really going to distance yourself from us? Natalie asked. I'm going to do what you taught me, I replied. I'm going to put myself first. They left quietly, defeated. But I wasn't celebrating their difficulties. I was just done being responsible for them. That night, I found another letter from Grandma, one James had saved for after the confrontation. Forgiveness will come in time, but boundaries come first. I'm proud of you. She'd known everything, planned everything, even this. 6 months later, my life was unrecognizable in the best possible way. Martinez and Associates had landed 3 major international contracts. We'd hired 50 new employees, including some of the best architects in the country, who wanted to work for a firm that valued merit over favoritism. The company was thriving under my leadership, and everyone knew it. The fraud charges against Julian had resulted in consequences. He'd accepted a plea agreement to avoid incarceration, but would be paying restitution for years. Last I heard, he was working at his uncle's car dealership in New Jersey, probably using his charm with customers the way he'd once used it with me. Natalie had surprised everyone, maybe even herself. After hitting a difficult point, she'd actually started rebuilding. She was still working at Starbucks, but she'd also enrolled in community college for business classes, paying her own way for the first time in her life. We hadn't spoken in months, but I'd heard from Mom that she was in therapy, finally dealing with years of entitlement and jealousy. My parents had downsized everything: the house, the cars, the lifestyle. Dad's embezzlement case had been settled out of court, but his reputation in the business world was finished. He'd taken a job as a junior consultant at a small firm. Mom had started working, too, as a receptionist at a dental office. They were learning at 62 what it meant to earn rather than take. "They ask about you," Rachel told me over lunch. "Your mom comes into the salon sometimes. She always asks how you are. And I tell her you're thriving because you are." She was right. I'd started dating again, carefully, with boundaries firmly in place. His name was Daniel, a civil engineer who'd never heard of my family situation until our 3rd date. He'd listened to the whole story, then said, "Your grandmother sounds like she was brilliant, and so are you." He was kind, stable, financially responsible, and completely his own person. The board would definitely approve. Not that I was thinking that far ahead. I'd learned not to rush into anything. The most unexpected development was the letter I'd received from Natalie last week. "Helena, I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but therapy requires me to make amends. Not for forgiveness, but for accountability. I was unkind to you. I took everything I could because I was jealous of everything you were. You were smart, talented, hardworking, everything I wasn't. Instead of trying to be better, I tried to make you smaller." Julian was never about connection. He was about winning, about proving I could take anything from you. I see now how immature that was. You gave me something at that ceremony, though you didn't mean to. You showed me who I really was. It was uncomfortable, but it was necessary. I'm working on being better. Not for you, not for the family, but for myself. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know, Natalie. I'd read it 3 times, then filed it away. Maybe someday we'd talk. Maybe not. But for now, boundaries were more important than bridges. Grandma's portrait hung in my office now, watching over the enterprise she'd built, and I was expanding. Sometimes I talked to it, telling her about contracts won and challenges overcome. "You taught me the most important lesson," I said to her picture. "That being kind doesn't mean being passive, that patience isn't the same as inaction, and that sometimes the best outcome isn't vindication at all. It's just living your truth and letting others face theirs. The company was mine. The future was mine. And for the first time in my life, I was exactly where I belonged. That's my story of how I transformed betrayal into achievement without raising my voice or creating drama. Just patience, preparation, and perfect timing. If you've made it this far, you're appreciated. Thank you for listening. What boundaries do you need to set in your life? Let me know in the comments. If this story inspired you, please share it with someone who needs to hear that justice doesn't always come with drama. Sometimes it comes with documents. Subscribe for more stories of quiet achievements. Until next time, remember the best outcome is a life well lived.